of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Knutson?
Here.
District 1, Morset?
Here.
District 2, Yaku?
Here.
District 3, Bernard? Here. District 4, Wyland?
Here.
District 5, O'Malley?
Here.
District 6, Burchell?
Here. All right, at this time we take comments and suggestions from citizens present. If there's anyone here who'd like to address the council tonight on any subject that may have an impact on the city of Hudson or that might come before the Common Council at a future meeting, this is your chance. Would anyone like to address the council tonight? We'll move on to the consent agenda. Would you read those items first for us, please?
To approve the public hearing regular meeting minutes and closed session minutes of May 3rd, 2010. To approve claims for payment in the amount of $322,064.82. A detailed description is available in the clerk's office on request and posted on the city's website. To approve the issuance of regular operators licenses for the period May 18th, 2010 through June 30th, 2010 to John DeVore, St. Paul, Minnesota, Scott Kaiser, Hammond, Wisconsin, Rana Kubker, Hudson, Wisconsin, Rochelle LaFlanc, Clear Lake, Wisconsin, and to issue regular operators licenses for the period July 1st, 2010 through June 30th, 2012 to Brandon Clark, Somerset, Wisconsin, Maiken Ekstad, Hudson, Wisconsin, Helen Kwok, Hudson, Wisconsin, Rose Meinke, Hudson, Wisconsin, Ruth E. Peterson, Hudson, Wisconsin, and the issuance of temporary operators licenses to be used at the Hudson Hockey Association event on July 31st, 2010 to Susan and Michael Stoskop of Hudson, Wisconsin, and to deny the application of Scott Maddie, 1202 Hidden Lane, New Richmond, Wisconsin, based on the recommendation of the Police Chief Jensen. To approve the issuance of a temporary Class B license to the Hudson Hockey Association to sell beer on July 31st, 2010 at their 3-on-3 alumni tournament at 1820 Hanley Road. To approve the issuance of an amusement device license to Clifford Hens and a permit for one device located at Dick's Bar. To approve the Stipes Shows Carnivals to be held May 20th through 23rd, 2010 in Plaza 94 parking lot, contingent on the approval from the property owner, Kraus Anderson. Place on file the quarterly report of the wastewater director and the water utility director and the Public Utility Commission minutes of May 11th, 2010. That is all.
All right. That's your consent agenda. We have a motion.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Morset?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Burchell?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Yakub?
Yes.
Was that 6?
Yes.
So the consent agenda is approved. Let's move on to the Plan Commission. Item number 1, which is amendment to Chapter 202 signs, the regulations for electronic message display signs, ordinance number 11-10. The staff recommendation is for a first reading. Plan Commission recommended approval. And Danny Darnold's here to tell you about it, answer questions.
Last January 1st, a moratorium on electronic signs, construction and erection of electronic signs was approved by the Common Council and put in effect on January 1st of 2010. There's a 6-month moratorium, and with the directive to the Plan Commission to review this issue of having our sign ordinance updated to address the technology of electronic signs, or what's now defined as electronic message display signs. The recommendations of the Plan Commission, we've reviewed a lot of legal case, also used 2 examples from the sign industry with the knowledge that that's where the information came from, was the sign industry itself. But I think the sign industry has now recognized that they must make these signs more attractive to the overall community, and if allowed to be unattended in some considerations such as brightness, that the community is only going to regulate them more closely in continued form. So the recommendations really address bringing the sign ordinance up to date as far as technology. The sign ordinance does not require a public hearing consideration. However, that's really up to the Common Council. What will occur, hopefully in the next 2 months, will be a comprehensive amendment to the sign ordinance addressing a full range of issues, which this is the first issue that we hope to get the recommendation back in time for the moratorium lapse and have it considered by the Common Council. But please understand there will be additional amendments to the sign ordinance coming, addressing off-premise signs, temporary signs, and so forth. So my recommendation, so it doesn't have an appearance that we're just rushing through this, the moratorium's good through the end of June, that you have first reading. But this is the recommendation. I think Dean and I and Al Burchell have been very involved in these discussions at Plan Commission. We'd be pleased to answer any questions for you. I don't know if Catherine has, as city attorney, has any additional comments she may want to make.
I do. I discussed this some with Denny and just raised the issue with the mayor as well. This proposed ordinance does have some content-based restrictions in that it only allows on-premises advertising, time, date, temperature, weather, or similar public service information may be provided. That is consistent with how the city regulates regular billboards and signs. However, the electronic message boards are a little bit different in that, well, let me back up. The purpose behind that restricting it to on-premises signage is, I think, to avoid proliferation of signs so that you can only advertise the premises where the sign is located. Electronic message boards are different in that it's not an additional sign. It would be additional advertising on that sign. They can change their messages. So I did a little bit of looking in the case law. There's not anything specific that I've found, and I haven't had time to really look at it, but courts have looked carefully at both the off-premises and on-premises restriction, and I think this may need some work in that respect. The other portion that I'm concerned about, or similar public service information, that might be difficult to enforce. What kind of public service information? All of a sudden, do you see what I mean? The city is regulating what can go on a sign. It's not just regulating the time, manner, place, public safety type issues. Visual blight has been recognized with regular type billboards, but these electronic message boards are a little different in that you're not talking about an additional sign necessarily. And in your ordinance, you do have a separation requirement, which does kind of get at that proliferation of sign issue. They have to be 50 feet apart. On the other hand, I'm interested in hearing what the discussion was at Plan Commission, because it could be that constant, changing of signs and having more advertising on these signs could be a traffic, more distraction, that type of thing. But I just pointed out as an issue, I think we need to look at it, or I need to look at it before it's adopted, because I think there are some constitutional problems, or it could be an area of challenge. The other portion that needs just some additional language is in F, whereby you could have a changing type sign upon issuance of a conditional use permit. Again, I need more information on the Plan Commission discussion, because there needs to be factors that the council considers in issuing a conditional use permit, and I don't know what factors would pertain to allowing one of these remotely changed or automatically changing signs. I assume it's related to public safety, but we need to have in the ordinance the factors so that you don't have a government official just having unfettered discretion over a content issue. So those are the areas that I think need some work. And I just, from people who were participating at the Plan Commission, what was the discussion on that
Well,
issue?
let me
First
address-
on the off-premises restriction.
I try to address each of your concerns, and I think the concern about that we have content-based restriction, which under Supreme Court rulings under the First Amendment, that's a critical area. And anytime you deal with sign regulation, you are potentially dealing with regulation of free speech. And there is a hierarchy of which speech is the most protected and which is less protected, and commercial speech is somewhat less protected. In other words, if you're going to go there, you need to have very good reasons. Our reason here would be public safety, the traffic concerns and so on. So we did review in regards to the, not for the content of the message, but in regards to the flashing and so on, we had some pretty good data. There was a study down in Milwaukee about what happened.
Interstate travel.
The number of accidents near the electronic message board that was done by the WSDOT, I believe, and the federal.
Brewer Stadium.
Near the Brewer Stadium. So we did look at some things like that. I think in regards to the content advertising, to say that only on premises is allowed, and by saying that, so everyone understands. For example, at one of our meetings, a local merchant whose business is a block or two off of I-94 said to me, if you allowed off-premise advertising on these, I would immediately rent space on one of those to tell about my business so that freeway traffic could know that I'm just down here a couple of blocks away. And once you start doing that, I think there will be an incredible demand for changeable message signs along I-94. So I'll recognize, and I think the Plan Commission recognized, that there are a variety of levels of potential interference with the message, and that's one, but it's one that we've had in our sign code for years, Catherine. That language is exactly out of our current ordinance, the business about off-premise, and you mentioned the wording,
Proliferation.
other similar public use is, if I had my glasses, I could actually read it, but it's directly in the sign ordinance right now. Denny, do you know the section? I know it's here because
I don't necessarily doubt that. That
Yeah.
doesn't, number one, billboards, I think, are different from electronic message boards. We're not talking necessarily about additional physical signs. We're talking about more different messages on the same sign, correct?
So 202-4D in the current code, it says, no illuminated sign which changes in either color or intensity of light shall be permitted, except one giving time, date, temperature, weather, or other similar public service information. And the part about on-premises, we have a general prohibition against off-premises advertising. It's just not allowed anywhere in the city.
And we have to look at, as long as we're looking at it now, what is the public purpose behind that? And I just want to make sure I can understand it and it applies with respect to traditional billboards. I think the purpose has been, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the purpose has been to prevent visual blight, proliferation of numbers of signs. That may not apply to an electronic message board where you're not necessarily putting in more physical signs, you're just putting more messages on one existing sign. And you're already controlling the time within which it can change. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be obstructionist, I'm just trying to show that it could be challenged, and if there is a public safety reason for it, which there could be, we need to talk about that. I can imagine that if you have, well, more types of advertising, more messages being put out there to the driver, that may be a traffic hazard. But I don't know, that's why I asked about the discussion and the information that was available to the plan commission.
We did have some public hearing on this, and I think they're still on the internet right now. If you go under information, you can find the links to some YouTube clips. And one of those is from a city in Oklahoma where they have a state ordinance on this now based on distraction to drivers. And you talk about proliferation of signs. I mean, in the background of the reporter, there's a row of about 10 of these signs, and they're all flashing. It's just like mini Las Vegas. And we've got about a mile or two corridor there that, I think if we aren't careful, it's going to look like just a flashing arcade or something.
Well, it looks to me like you're dealing with two different things. I don't think the intent, and it better not be, because I'd oppose it, is to regulate the content based on.
You can't
right.
do that. I mean,
So
Well,
it
you
looks
are
like
when you're saying off premises. You're
Yeah,
saying you
so-
can't advertise. You can't put on that message board an advertisement for a business that's located elsewhere.
So C would be, take C out and then worry about the actual physical structure of the sign and what it's doing, correct? Is that the intent?
well, the intent is to reduce the
blight,
electronic
I get
signs
that.
as a distraction to the public, where you're walking, where you're riding a bicycle, or where you're in a car.
I don't think we should be putting in language what says they can and can't do.
Well, I think that's what Catherine's brought this
Give you
discussion
another
up.
example that came up as we talked about this, and it's out in the industrial park. So you got a restaurant that's located off of Hanley to the south of Hanley, a block, and turn and go another block. And they had made an agreement with a property owner distant from their property out along the road to put up a sign there. That is not allowed in the city of Hudson at all, ever, anywhere. Doesn't matter if you rent the space, pay to have the sign. You can't put up a sign on someone else's property advertising your business down the way.
I guess I'm not arguing that point. I'm arguing the content point. And that's why
Well,
I'm
this
not-
is the
That is the-
content. It's not
yeah.
allowed because it's a
But
content-based
you
restriction.
can't dictate
Well,
what C
except in
says.
that situation, it's an additional sign on that piece of property. And the purpose behind that is not to regulate the content, but to regulate the number of signs and to avoid visual blight. You just don't have the exact same argument in an electronic message board because you're not adding signs, you're adding messages on the same sign.
So using that argument, would you let a business double up signs and say, here's a sign for our business, and by the way, here's one for a business 3 blocks in? It wouldn't be another sign, but it's off premises signage.
If you're doubling up on signs, then that's a different restriction. If you're worried about numbers of signs, you can limit number per property, you can address the separation bit, so that if it's the physical location and not the content you're regulating, that's different.
But I guess I don't understand how that's not still off premises signage.
Well,
Do you
it
have an
wouldn't have to be
electronic
off
message?
premises. It could be you can't have 2 signs on your property.
But if I have a business 3 blocks off of Crestview, and I want to put a message on a signboard that's right on Crestview for my business, and I talk to the owner and they say it's fine, is that not still off premises advertising?
It is, but the reason behind limiting that is that you don't want to have additional signs all over the
I don't know
place.
that that's.
Well, that's the purpose that's been recognized by the courts, avoiding visual blight and traffic safety, more distractions. That's been the legal and recognized valid purpose for that type of restriction. And it has been upheld with respect to regular physical traditional billboards. The difference between message boards is you may not have additional signs, so the argument about visual blight and proliferation of signs doesn't carry over quite as well.
This whole subject area is tricky because of the First Amendment protection. So something as simple as garage sale signs, we have treated them differently than all other signage. We've treated real estate open house signs differently. Normally we do not allow any signage in the road right away, but we have 2 exceptions, which is clearly a content-based exception.
Yep.
If you want to advertise hot dogs down the street, that's not allowed. If you want to advertise a garage sale down the street, that's allowed. If you want to advertise a car for sale, that's not allowed. If you want to advertise a real estate, that is allowed. That's a content-based. Right. And we talked about that a lot, and frankly, you can probably find 6 or 8 areas of our current code that were we to be challenged, we know we'd lose.
Yeah.
I'm not going to point out which ones.
It's not enough to say, we do this already. We're looking at it. We need to try to do it as best we can.
Well, we can say no to these signs. That's one thing you can do. And that's the thing we talked about is, there's a temptation to say, well, yes, we would allow that under these criteria. And you get into where you're making a decision or you're arbitrarily deciding based on content.
Could we just take that issue of only on-premises advertising? Could we put that down in the section where they have to get a conditional use permit if they're going to do something other than on premises?
Well, and on what basis are you going to say, yes, you can advertise this thing, this off premises? It's just a difficult area if you limit. I don't know how you came up with the 4-second changeover. That seems to be related to.
That's a safety.
Yeah, that's a safety issue. And the 50-foot separation seems to be related to the proliferation of sign issue. I'm not sure what the reason behind the off-premises limitation is.
I'd like to move that we postpone action on 11-10 and authorize Catherine to issue us a report in the very near future prior to the moratorium deadline so that we can act on this. It clearly is not ready for prime time yet.
I'll second.
It's been a struggle, and I think you've got a motion and a second, and I'll grant you that opening up our sign code brings up some fairly glaring deficiencies there. So then we recognize it needs work. Getting to the point that it's something that we're happy with and would pass constitutional muster is harder than you think, because this is supposed to be the easy part. Right, Danny?
Well,
there's several other portions that we have worked on. They're almost ready, and there's others like the garage sale. Honestly, we haven't even tackled it because we just aren't ready.
Well, both of you, Catherine and Dean, you've touched on the very clear and obvious answer that if you want to avoid visual blight, don't allow electronic signs. That's the real answer. But let's proceed as we are. We have a motion in a second.
I can just make. Please understand, you can't extend a moratorium also. That's.
I know that, but let's have the initial report before the moratorium, so then we can decide whether or not to extend.
And these are, relatively new in terms of court cases dealing with electronic message boards.
I'd like you to do some research and find out if we can find a community that has somehow been challenged or there's been some sort of court ruling on the on-premise, off-premise.
Yeah, whether it's regular billboards or electronic billboards.
Anyone else?
Just a question to Catherine. So do you feel that because it's electronic, it's different than a regular billboard or a regular sign that's on a building?
With respect to the issue of the proliferation of signs, because on one electronic message board, you can have a number of messages, advertisements, instead of putting up additional billboards.
Or poster signs. What I'm getting at is a business downtown can say, go up the hill, Cooley Road 3 blocks. And we're trying to avoid having 22 signs
Right,
sitting there and sending somebody all over town.
yeah.
What, isn't an electric, I don't understand the difference, I guess.
Well,
I can't-
because just, you said it,
Yep.
you're trying to avoid 20 different signs. With an electronic message board, you don't need 20 different signs, you
Right.
just have one.
For their
that-
business.
That changes, well, you have one that could advertise any number of businesses, but you don't have the proliferation and visual blight issue. Now, you may have the traffic distraction issue, because people, they get used to seeing just on-premises signs. If the messages are always changing, it may be a public safety issue. I'm not rejecting that, I'm just saying I don't have all the information in order to make that argument.
Well, visual blight is potentially the concern here, and if that was the concern before, I think we can all see your point that it's not multiple signs, it's one sign that can change every 4 seconds. It could be 900 different signs in an hour, but it's only one sign. But it's in that changing that it becomes more obnoxious to certain people and causes sort of the blight.
Yeah.
All right, other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, we're off to a good start now. Let's move on to number 5, application of Tim La Dolce Vita LLC for a Class B beer license and change their trade name from Toscano to Urban Olive and Vine, and the Finance Committee recommends approval.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll approve the application. Number 6, the committee recommended we send this item back to the Public Works Committee for a recommendation from them, and then have it taken up again at the Finance Committee. Without objection, we'll do that. There's a motion to
Second.
do that and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And that is sent to committee. Number 8, consider the RFP for consulting assessor services for a 2-year contract for revaluation in 2011 and maintenance contract in 2012. The idea here is that instead of our annual maintenance contract, we would instead begin the process in 2011 of doing a community-wide revaluation, citywide. Put it out to bids, and the recommendation from the Finance Committee was to approve the staff recommendation, which is to have staff prepare RFPs to do a 2-year contract to get the work done on the revaluation in 2011, and then to include in the contract a regular maintenance contract for 2012, and to bid it in 2 different ways, with option A having all the assessment functions be outsourced, and option B to continue the way that we have been doing it, with an assessment technician function being provided by existing city staff.
So moved.
And there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any questions? We have Mike Wallace is here to answer your questions, and Denny Darnold. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion is approved. We'll get the RFP going. Number 9, consider police department purchase of digital evidence camera. The recommendation from the Finance Committee was to approve this with $2,500 to be spent from a grant that came from the Lions Club. The remainder to be tentatively paid for through our 2010 long-term capital projects budget. And if it turns out that we don't do that bond sale for financing, then the chief mentioned that they have a equipment fund available that could be tapped for this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And that is approved. Number 10, review and consider awarding the bid submitted for City Hall remodeling project. I did have some discussion on this one in a finance committee. Ultimately, the motion was to approve the contract, which was on your table tonight. Apologize, it was inadvertently left out of your packet. Quick review, we purchased the First Street building and Second Street building. We have tentatively sold the Fourth Street building. In the process, we'll be moving some various city departments around. Police department's already vacated first floor downstairs here at City Hall and moved into the First Street building. This project was done with money that was left over because the police department renovations came in under budget, so we reallocated about a month ago $25,000 to be spent on some minimal renovations for the first floor down here to create some new spaces. It will allow us to consolidate all the EMS functions and staff all in one spot. The billing that's currently on second floor of City Hall can move down there. The administration that's currently on third floor of City Hall can move over there. A lot of the staff storage space and office space and day room space that's currently in a variety of places will be able to move in there. And we'll be able to no longer rent the staff on-call apartment that's currently being rented from a private party in downtown Hudson. All of those things will be able to move in here. The one bid that we received was from Skyline Renovations, and it's in the amount of $13,570. In brief, the Finance Committee recommendation is to go ahead with this. Subject to attorney review, there are some considerations of the contract, the terms, and some other considerations.
Yeah, the bid was half before any work is started and half upon completion, and typically the city does not pay half in advance. It does progress payments and other issues like performance and payment bond and insurance requirements.
If I may interject at this point, Catherine, I spoke with the contractor immediately following the Finance Committee meeting, and he waives the payment in advance, does not need that, and he carried with him and showed to me the insurance certificate. So I will move for acceptance of this bid.
We'll still have to come up with an actual contract and review the insurance certificate
Contingent
and the
upon those
payment.
things.
All right, so
Second.
Scott's got a motion to approve with the contingent to the legal review and the contract, and a second by Lee.
Yep.
Further discussion, just to update you on what we were talking about. I think we've recently been reviewing the operations and financing of the EMS. And we discussed in the Finance Committee the unusual circumstance of the fact that they're often treated as being a separate entity from the city, but actually are closer to being a city department already than most people may realize. And that in essence, the EMS was formed originally as a city department with the idea that then there would be contracts and agreements formed with our surrounding municipalities to have them participate. We've got the EMS Commission in which they give guidance and advice. Here's the quandary. Currently, the rent that's being paid across the street, and again, I kind of object to the term rent because it's $2,400, $2,200 for the whole year. It really covers utilities and repairs and insurance and all of those kinds of things. And for all the space the EMS has there of city space, that's what their transfer payment has been. And then there's this apartment that we hope to be able to vacate, and that costs about $800 a month.
And then they pay $400 a month for the offices here.
And they pay for offices within City Hall. Now, other city departments that are city departments, clerk's office, community development, so on, they don't pay rent. There is no internal transfer saying, here's how much your office space costs. Now, we've treated the EMS as if they were perhaps more separate from the city than they actually are. The question is, should they be paying anything for downstairs? Should they be paying a proportion of the city hall expenses based on the size of what they've got down there? That's a subject that's yet to be determined. I think we'll be discussing this at a future agenda item. So for those of you that listened to our discussion at Finance, we probably took that discussion as far as we could without having it on the agenda. It needs to come back as an agenda item. But for the renovation part of it, we will be creating new carpet, new paint. We'll be creating a 2-room suite for administrative offices. We'll be creating a conference room like what's on the 3rd floor that'll be available for all city departments. I think it'll be pretty usable space. And, I think we need to have some further discussions as to what is the relationship between the city and the EMS, and how much should the EMS be paying for space. So we'll put that on a future agenda. Now, Scott made a motion and Lee seconded it. I'll open it up for discussion. Anyone?
Yes, I guess I would speak against spending that money at this point without an agreement. Again, if we have other uses for that space, indication are that they're not real happy about being charged rent in that space. I think it's, if they don't want it, we can find a better use for it then. I thought they were crammed over there and they needed the space, but I would think it's very similar to our fire department, that we use those people, and the other municipalities do pay for the services and the building and the equipment that are there. And I think that it should be pro rata to the number of calls, or however we decide how we're going to pay for it, that that's only a fair thing to do for the city, for the residents of the city, that they get a fair bargain for, or bang for their buck.
Mr. Mayor, there seems to be some confusion. I'd like to have the Chief Christensen come up from the EMS and explain the position of the EMS.
Okay.
If they don't want to move, or they do want to move, or what?
Yeah, we have full intentions of moving. We do need the space, and it would bring together a lot of administrative functions, crew functions, probably make for more efficient operations. The issue we came up with in the EMS Commission was we didn't have any concrete rent numbers up until a few weeks ago, and when that came up, I brought that to the EMS Commission's attention. They in turn stated that we did not have that budgeted for this year because we just didn't know, and they wanted to let the city know that we still would like the space, but we did not have that budgeted in this area.
But the intent is to budget for it next year.
Next year, yes. If we need to budget for that, we would budget for that next year.
Thank you. All right. Well, there's a motion. Any other discussion?
I think there's additional benefit to the fire department. Jim Fry has gone on record that EMS is certainly not unwelcome, but he needs their space in the public safety building.
Well, just to push the envelope a little bit, I'll say that, I agree with you. And I think that the fire department clearly needs more space, and there are 2 immediate ways that we can get that. One is to repurpose some of the EMS space, if we can make it available, and that's yet to be seen how much of that we can, but I think there's at least possibility of some. The second thing would be an addition and renovation on that current building. I mean, that was in the Frisbee plan. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's going to cost a lot more than $13,000.
The $500,000 was their bid for that,
And I think
or
that
their estimate for that.
at Finance, we discussed the fact that the rent right over there is $800 something a month off-site, and plus utilities, so we're getting close to paying it off in the first year, paying these renovations off and the rent we're saving across the street.
Here's the thing about it. I mean, if you treat the EMS as if it's a city department and we have customers, we would dictate to our customers what the pricing is, and they would decide whether they want to pay the annual per capita then.
Right.
Last year, we pointed out that we were running in the red, and we would need to have a higher per capita to not run in the red.
Right.
And the EMS commission voted to not raise the per capita enough to correct the deficit. I think some water's gone under the bridge since then, and there's probably a greater awareness of the fact that something's got to change there in order to get the books all balanced. That said, if they were to be treated as a city department, we wouldn't charge any rent. We'd move them in there, and we'd you know, instead of the paying for the apartment over there, that would go away, and we'd probably improve their financial standing by $12,000 a year or something, by treating them the way we treat the clerk's office or the assessor's office or any other city department that doesn't pay rent. They're kind of caught in this quandary of wanting to be independent, and you can see the flexing the independence right here by saying, hey, don't do this because we haven't agreed on the rent yet. Well, we wouldn't do that with any other city department. We would just decide what's going to happen and we'd do it.
Well, how do we correct that? I know when I was.
That's not on the agenda.
No.
It's not on the agenda, so
He started it.
the leash is pulled.
Call the question.
How about I call, yeah, let's call the question. Let's.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
5-1, motion passes. We'll move on to well, we've got a mistake here, and I don't know what we can do. Catherine, are you aware of the mistake?
Yeah, I am, and it's not
Nothing we
on the
can do.
agenda, no.
The Second Vine Street, I just noted now, is not listed. It's here, but it's not listed on the agenda. And unfortunately, neither is update on projects, so we couldn't slide that there either.
So we're not talking about it.
Sorry about that, Chuck. Is that important enough that we need to have a special meeting? We can talk about scheduling
Well,
another
you can
meeting.
schedule a meeting. You can't talk about how important it is.
Let's find out how important it is before we... All right. We'll have to talk about whether we need to set another meeting. Let's go on to new business, the annual compliance maintenance.
He said no.
The annual compliance maintenance report for the wastewater treatment plant, resolution 10-.
We'll have to suspend the rules on that.
Yeah.
I'll
Yep.
move to suspend now.
All right, there's a motion to suspend the
Second.
rules and a second. Any discussion on the suspension? Roll call vote on the suspension.
Morset,
Yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Wyland,
Yes.
Burchell,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Yaku.
Yes.
All right, the rules are suspended. Now we could have a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt resolution 1010. Wastewater treatment director Jim Schreiber is here to give you the report. Jim, good work.
The Compliance Maintenance Annual Report for 2009, which is prepared for your review and submittal to the Department of Natural Resources, assesses the performance and compliance with permit requirements for 2009 and evaluates the wastewater treatment plant and its collection system in 9 separate areas. And then it assigns a letter grade and a grade point for each area and establishes an overall GPA. For those 9 areas, the City of Hudson wastewater utility performed at a GPA of 4.0 in each category, and overall 4.0 GPA. We've been able to produce a high-quality wastewater effluent and maintain our rate structure at some of the lowest rates in the state and the lowest in our geographical area. We've also been able to meet our present needs and establish funds to meet our future needs. So I think we're performing very, very well.
Nice job.
With that, I'll
We have a motion and a second. Thanks. Yes.
I'd like to congratulate Jim Schreiber and the crew at the wastewater treatment plant. They exemplify the very best of what we strive for in the Hudson City government. They are delivering the best possible service with the highest possible grade you can get, and at the same time at the lowest cost in the region. And you can't get better than that, and they deserve our accolades, and he turns in a 4.0 year after year after year.
I agree, and further than that, we have adopted, for example, phosphorus restrictions, and over the past several years have seen dramatic reductions in the amount of phosphorus in the effluent.
Since 1999, we've reduced our phosphorus discharge to the Lake St. Croix by 90%.
By over 90%, so that we now are a very small contributor to the phosphorus going into the St. Croix compared to several other sources nearby.
Who shall remain nameless?
And we've been working on mercury. Jim, you want to talk about some of your efforts in mercury control?
We've joined the Green Tier Charter for Mercury Reduction. It's a part voluntary program to become, in some aspects, a mandatory program. We've been given a variance on an effluent limit for mercury. Mercury effluent limits were established and have been started to be implemented by the DNR. And so we are trying to ramp up our compliance to meet those regulations. So we have implemented a mercury reduction program. We have contacted likely sources within our distribution system where mercury are more likely to occur, trying to bring our level of mercury down by removing it at the source, because treatment for mercury is fairly impractical at this point. So that's the program that we're implementing. We've begun it. We're not quite a year. Well, we're a year into it now.
Another area that I'd like to highlight is when we set the goal of energy efficiency, Jim grabbed that and probably worked harder on it than any other city department, and has made some pretty concrete improvements. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you've done in the area of energy efficiency?
I'm going to be submitting a separate report on that, but some quick highlights. We've reduced our electrical usage when you look at kilowatt hours by 5% this last year. We've reduced our gas consumption in therms per degree day by approximately 40%. Those are with operational changes, without capital improvement. And now we're looking at where can we further reduce those levels with some capital improvement. And we have been studying 3 different areas, larger areas, which we'll be bringing to the council, where we feel we can reduce further electrical usage and also gas usage at the wastewater treatment plant.
You're not freezing your employees, are you?
Well, he's done a great job at that, and you remember the goal that I set, and I'll frankly admit that I'm not sure we're there, but we have.
The last time I looked and we were waiting on gas fuel numbers, it was about 7%, not dollars, but kilowatt hours for electricity, or BTUs actually.
The goal was to reduce our energy consumption by 5%, energy consumption per capita by 5% over a 2-year period. Now that sounds like not a very tough goal to reach, but it's surprising. It is tough. So that's irregardless of the price of the energy, just what is our consumption. And Jim and their department has clearly met and exceeded that goal. We've worked on street lighting. We've been doing some things. We've had upgrades to trucks and so on. We need to look at that again. I think, why don't you give us a report from the benchmark to where we are sometime soon.
I've got all the numbers in there. I'm just waiting on the fuel numbers, which are kind of...
All right. But Jim's done a good job on that. All right, anyone else have a question for Jim?
I have a question. Jim, have you done any more on the drugs, the prescription drug program? Have you talked with Marty or the county about, I know we talked about it.
Marty has been working with the county, and they are in the process of working on establishing a county-wide program, which
Makes sense.
from our perspective, looking at the water or the environmental side, since it is a watershed approach to everything, that makes much more sense. And then also from their perspective, law enforcement side, keeping drugs away from people who shouldn't have them, that also makes a lot more sense.
Al, at Public Safety, I asked for an update from Marty, and he was gonna get everybody involved with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And Resolution 10-10 is adopted. Communications and recommendations from the mayor of two proclamations. One is Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service providing life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the members of the St. Croix EMS and Rescue, with a roster of 50 EMTs, of which 21 are at EMT paramedic level, responded to 1,564 calls during 2009. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And the members of EMS, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. Whereas the 2010 theme, Anytime, Anywhere Will Be There, was chosen to recognize the commitment that EMS personnel make to the communities they serve, and this dedication to their mission provides round-the-clock care to communities across the nation and emphasizes to remind the public that exceptional service is being provided to countless patients every day, often under challenging circumstances. I call on all citizens of Hudson to observe the week of May 16th through the 22nd as Emergency Medical Services Week, and observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities regarding health education and safety issues. Second proclamation I didn't get in your packet. It's St. Croix River Awareness and Cleanup Week. St. Croix River watershed or basin encompasses 7,760 square miles with over 24 major sub-watersheds and hundreds of smaller direct tributaries straddling the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. Millions of tourists visit annually and support a thriving tourist industry. Hundreds of thousands of boaters, anglers, and quiet sports enthusiasts enjoy the water. 3 million people thrive in or near the basin and claim the St. Croix Valley is central to their quality of life. It's a major migration corridor for hundreds of species of waterfowl and birds, and the historic boundary area of the Lakota and Ojibwe nations and location of many historical sites and structures. Lake St. Croix was named as an impaired water for excess phosphorus in 2008, and two major tributaries, the Sunrise and the Willow, were similarly designated. Volunteer efforts can help protect the St. Croix River Basin. For these reasons, I hereby proclaim July 17th to the 25th as St. Croix River Awareness and Cleanup Week and encourage everyone to celebrate and engage in voluntary cleanup of riverbank litter. Any communications from any older person?
I have two. Can we at our next meeting get an update on the part-time IT position that we approved and passed?
In fact, we're almost there, yes.
Okay. And then I'd like to revisit, if it goes back to Public Works, the weed control of our parks and right-of-ways. Our parks are looking terrible, certain ones.
Okay. Scott.
I'd like to remind the citizens of Hudson, thousands of whom over the years have gone to the public library for the book sales, that the very last book sale ever will start this Thursday, the 20th, and end on Saturday, the 22nd, at 911 4th Street for great deals on good books. This is the last opportunity at the present location. Everything is on sale, practically. all proceeds, 100% of the proceeds go to fund your public library.
All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in the Emergency Medical Services Week, I want to mention to Eric, and I'm excited about the work that we've done. We did a space need analysis a number of years ago, looking for ways to improve our services and to improve the safety of the facility. So these guys do a great job. I just want to mention that, they're there whenever you need them. So thanks, Eric.
All right, anyone else? City Attorney?
Nope, nothing here.
City Administrator? Ready to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.